People who separated/divorced within 1 year of getting married. When did you know it was a mistake? When I caught my new bride having a workplace affair while I was receiving cancer treatments. It was not a pleasant time for me. Edit. Holy crap. Woke up to an awful lot of really nice notes. Thank you everyone, and to those who gifted silver and gold. I'm going to try to respond directly to some folks, but I will say this here. This happened about 25 years ago. Yes, I'm an old guy. It really sucked at the time. The day I found out I was a few months into both a major surgery and then daily radiation treatment. I was down to about 118 from my normal 155 lbs. But, as it turned out, it was really a good thing. We did not have a house or kids and the divorce was rather simple. I went on to get married again and have 3 incredible kids I would never have had otherwise. The entire experience taught me a lot about the power of forgiveness. Admittedly, it took me too long to learn this lesson, and I have a pretty great life today. If you are currently going through something similar, please know that life can and does get better. Thank you all again. And, while I watched Breaking Bad, I really never made the connection to me. So many of these comments have me laughing out loud. Edit #2. So we tried the whole marriage counseling thing after I caught her. The marriage counselor, however, was my wife's personal therapist. We had one meeting, and the therapist asked to meet with me privately. She subsequently reported to my wife, Nika seems to have a lot of anger. Yeah, think. I had just lost over 20% of my body weight. I was still going through treatments, and I found out my wife of less than a year was sleeping with a coworker. Lol. Best girlfriend I had to date at the time. I was in my late 30s, had never been married. Dated about a year, got married. Shortly after, she asked to have her name on all of my assets, a few rental houses, current house, and some financial instruments, the cars. Not a problem as we were married, I thought, but on a Wednesday she insisted it be done by that Friday. I didn't have time to do that, because work and a deadline. I could start it the next week, I said. She pitched a fit, and said if I loved her I would do it by Friday. I found this strange, and decided not to start it, and see what happened. She moved out of our bedroom into a guest room. Got cold around the house. Told me she would move back into our bedroom when I finished getting everything done. At this point I thought bullshit, and told her so. I went to my family lawyer to seek advice. She advised me not to put anything in her name at this point. Gave me the name of marriage counselor. She didn't want to go to counseling. She continued to live in the guest room. I took my lawyer's advice and did nothing about the assets. The long and short of it was, after 1 year off marriage, when on our anniversary she told me I didn't have her in my heart, I thought to myself, this is bullshit. About a week after that I told her, if this is the way it's going to be, I'm not going to be married like this. She then told me, okay, so what are you going to give me? Yes, she said. That point I consulted my lawyer on what a judge would come up with regarding community property for the past year. Number came up to 20G. I took that number and added about 20 grand and proposed that to her, so we can make it easy. I was going to spend more than that in lawyer's fees. If it got ugly, it got ugly. A week later I got served with papers with all said in the complaint. When added up, she was going after $750K for 1 year of marriage, 1 year of divorce proceedings, and 2 years of property settlement proceedings on what should have been a 2-hour problem. Judgment came. 215 points in the judgment. I owed her what would have been the community property, about 20 grand, but awarded me attorney's fees. So in net, she owed me about 30 grand and left her to go buy her own car. Turns out this judge had worked her ass off through school to become a lawyer and the same to become a judge by 40 years old. I was told by another attorney that normally this judge never gives attorney's fees, but was so pissed off at the gold dig my wife attempted that she felt it was justified in this case. Even though I came out okay financially, it was an emotional train wreck to have this happen and go through all that. It's been 15 years since it happened. I was not dateable for about 2 years, but now very happy with where I am and who I'm with. Edit. Wow, this reply to the op really blew up. Thanks much for the silver and gold. These are a first for me. Not sure, how do I find out who gave those to me so I can thank them directly? I can probably Google that. Lots of good comments. I'm trying to answer each question, but might take me a while. I'm in Asia right now and will be heading to bed soon. Thanks much for your thoughts. This happened 15 years ago, so I'm over the hurt, but the thoughts that you have been sending me have been uplifting. Point for the others with the stories similar to mine, and worse. I feel for you, I really do. I don't wish this type of thing on anybody. Divorce can be nasty, and I don't wish it on anyone. But in the case of damaging relationships, it's a tough but needed remedy. Honestly, before we even got married, but there was a great deal of denial and fear surrounding ending the relationship months before the wedding. However, there was a definitive moment when I realized this was not the man for me. About 3 weeks into our honeymoon, we had been traveling through the British Isles and finally made it to Italy. I really wanted to stay in a remote village and be immersed. He did not. We settled on Florence. Don't get me wrong, it's lovely there, and we saw a lot, but it's extremely touristy, and I didn't feel like I was getting the full cultural experience in a big city like that. I asked our host of the B&B what their favorite restaurant was, something only locals know about. The sweet man drew me a little map and even told me it would look closed, and was very small, and had very specific hours, which he wrote down for me. The next day, after some searching, we find it in an alleyway off the beaten path, and it's like a dream come true. Only Italians, no English translations on the menu, no couple from Florida at the table next to us. It's faking packed and it smells so amazing. They squeezed us in on a tiny table, got us menus, and said what I imagine was, "We'll be back in a bit." I was awestruck by finally feeling like I was in my home country. I'm from Italian descent and all American Italians dream of visiting Italy. This place was something out of the movies. Small dim lights, loud, classic Italian music in the background. The little old Italian lady making the pasta looked like my nonni. I was just smiling and taking it all in. For the first time since landing, truly feeling like I was in Italy. My husband looked at me and said, "This is too cramped. I can't eat here." I looked back at him and he just got up and walked out. I had to hold back tears realizing that he just walked out on me when I had found the happiest place on our honeymoon yet. The waitress came over confused and I just apologized as I stammered out of the restaurant. Both embarrassed and heartbroken, knowing this was not the kind of man I wanted to share experiences with. I knew at that moment I had made a huge mistake. Back in the early 1980s, I spent 6 years in the US Navy. In 1986 I was recruited to go into the US Army through a program for technical and intelligence experienced military personnel to become warrant officers. All the Navy offered me was sea duty and more sea duty. It looked like a real good deal. I was engaged to a young lady 3 years my junior and had a bit more than $20,000 in savings. Everything looked promising with a new career and family life. The wedding went off without a hitch. I was looking at a vacation of about 3 months between exiting the Navy and entering training for the Army. It was when my recruiter contacted me over my security clearance that things went south. My credit report did not match my questionnaire. There was 3 credit cards with a $14,000 balance I didn't mention. It was no big deal. They weren't delinquent, but I needed to amend my answers to account for them. Turns out my wife had opened up a charge card at our bank, then got a couple of store cards around town. She had purchased some serious clothes and jewelry, but the real kicker was she had bought a horse. She had taken lessons as a child and decided this was going to be her new thing. There was the price of the animal, riding gear, saddle, and tack, vet bills, stable fees, yada yada yada. I ended up dumping a big chunk of my savings into paying down these cards, then amending my questionnaire responses. She was from a very blue-collar family. They were very good people who worked hard for everything they had. But I don't think credit ratings and compounded interest rates were much discussed at the dinner table. So I explained about credit cards, the huge interest rate, how long it would take to pay one down, then about security clearances, and having a huge debt with no job would affect it. I treated this all as a bump in our relationship, but thing got dark really fast. My ship date was coming up, and things had to be done before I started training. I was in good physical shape, but I was facing boot camp, 8, airborne school, ranger school, warrant officer selection and advanced training. Basically 18 months of utter insanity. I was prepared for what I faced, but there was a lot that could go wrong. If I got through it, I was a warrant officer. But if I dropped the ball along the way, I would not only be enlisted, but junior enlisted in a job they would decide for me. In theory, I could end up a line cook and some chow hall at Camp Nowhere Point. About a week later, the phone rings. It's about the horse. No one was taking care of the animal, or cleaning the stable, or even feeding the poor thing. The stable had covered down for the sake of the animal, but now we're charging $350 a week for the extra services my wife was supposed to be doing. She was leaving our apartment every day, and I assumed it was for riding and care of the animal, and for the first week she was. The second week, she was lawyer shopping. She wanted out. She must have gotten wind of what happened at the stable, and didn't come home that night. The next day I got served with papers. Total marriage time 47 days, so I ended up with an apartment with 4 months on the lease, no car and a horse. I found a new home for the horse. I had to defer my ship date, and it took 14 months to settle the divorce. My security clearance was approved 2 days after the papers were filed. I shipped the next day. In the end, I had 2 pair of pants, 3 shirts and a pair of shoes that had no business on anyone's feet. I was working 2 minimum wage jobs, 14 hours a day, paying down debt, lawyers' fees, rent and sometimes eating to get by. I ended up at Fort Sill, Oklahoma mowing lawns for 2 months as I shipped without a training slot for boot camp. I wasn't happy, but I was relieved. In airborne school, I met a ROTC cadet who was going to airborne school over her summer break. She had a year to go before her commission, and we hit it off. We'd get together on holidays, between training, long weekends. When I finished training and got my warrant, still a cadet, she flew across the country to give me my first salute. I gave her a silver dollar as per tradition. 2 months later, she received her commission, to which I saluted her and returned the silver dollar. Married that Christmas. We've been together 31 years. There were a lot of red flags that I can only see now, in hindsight, tbh. For context, there was a pretty big age gap between us, and he had a really rough life when I first met him. Some friends of mine and I helped him get out of his bad situation, although it meant leaving his mother behind. Sweet woman, tbh. I couldn't see at the time how much that would fuck him up. Boy. There was a pretty long gap in the middle where I was focused on my career in politics and didn't see him, but when we reconnected he had become a pretty hot NGL. He had gotten involved with some pretty hardcore religious types, but they seemed like good people, and we even had some friends in common. We got to spend a lot of time together during that period because of reasons, but he was honestly funny, charming, a little creepy at times. Probably should have picked up on the fact that his politics kinda sucked even back then, but I guess I was just too smitten at that point. His mother died right in the middle of our time together, which faked him up pretty bad. I started to see an angry side to him which I should found more disturbing. Truthfully, but I mean his mother had just died, and I figured it was only a human reaction to that kind of pain. To be honest, I kinda thought I could save him. I know how stupid that sounds now, but he really had this puppy-like quality at times that made you just want to cuddle him. I got married to him right at the start of a big war in our country at the time, and we kinda felt like we had to live each day to the fullest given that we might not have much time together. The war, as it turned out, escalated very quickly, and within a year it had taken a pretty heavy toll on his mental health. It didn't help that I got pregnant around the same time. He started really worrying me when some pretty ugly abandonment issues reared their head. He couldn't bear the thought that something might happen to me and he'd lose me either because of the war or complications from childbirth, or I honestly don't know. He got real moody around this time and I could just feel our relationship slipping away. The last straw, the point where I definitely knew I had to leave him, was when he force choked the hell out of me on Mustafa and left me for dead while he fought with his old mentor. We separated pretty soon afterward, and it's left me pretty broken, tbh. The world feels like it's just fading away, and I've kinda lost the will to live. Not me, I've never married, but a close friend of mine that divorced within a year told me he knew on his wedding night he was making a huge mistake. In the months leading up to his wedding, His soon-to-be wife was spending more time with her mother than she had in the previous several years. On the day they wed, right after their nuptials, they went to take photos while the guests enjoyed cocktail hour. As they were getting ready, his new bride asked him to walk to an area with her for a minute of privacy. When they got to this gazebo or something, I don't recall exactly, her mother was waiting for them. As it turns out, the mother and bride went into a long diatribe about saving his soul, how together they'd recently been reborn and found Jesus, and wanted him to start attending services with them. Point now, this buddy of mine is an atheist, always has been. He was not raised in any kind of religion, but he doesn't announce his beliefs either. He has absolutely no qualms with people following God or whatever, but like me, he just doesn't want others to force their beliefs on him either. So he sat there on this gorgeous day, listened, and faked enjoyment the rest of the evening. The honeymoon was painful, and when they got home he tried to tell her he just wasn't interested in following, but was happy and supportive of her to find happiness the way she was. It wasn't good enough. Pointer, and her mother began pushing him, and within 6 months he dropped the bomb that there was no way their union would last. He had a rough couple years after he moved out of his own house that he allowed her to live in, but he's since met someone else, remarried, and had a baby. Dude is an all-timer, one of the nicest people you could ever meet. So not me, but an ex-point. So I dated this girl for almost a year. We'll call her Lisa. Really thought I was in love with her. I mean, she was a pretty, cool, slightly older chick. Opened my eyes to a lot cool different stuff. Those were some crazy days. So around the end of the relationship she started to act a little weird, distant. I of course handled it in the most mature and adult way, by being clingy and irrational. I still cringe thinking about it, but you know, to be young and in love. Well, fast forward to after our breakup. I'm incredibly depressed. I mean, don't want to get out of bed depressed, and to add to it, she already has a new boyfriend like a week after we broke up. Yes, I know. I'm also in the future with you. Looking back, this guy, we'll call him Rick, is literally the opposite of me. He's tall, absolutely shredded, and has a good job. She brings him around our mutual friends, and like everybody loves him. So about 3 months after that, I'm feeling a little better. I run into her at a party, and she tells me she's getting married to him. Honestly, I was fairly over the breakup by then, and I wished her luck. So as the wedding day draws closer, she keeps calling me, and we chat from time to time. One night she calls and tells me that how great it would be if I showed up to her house before wedding, and whisked her away. Now, if she had asked me like a week after we broke up, I might have done it, but by this time I had gotten laid a couple of times, lost some weight, and was feeling pretty good about myself. So it was a hard pass on that. That was the last time we talk for months. The day of the wedding comes, and I proceed to get absolutely trashed. I turn off my phone, pick up a rando at the bar, and party the night away. Yes, I know I wasn't completely over Lisa, but I think I handled it well. I wake up the next day hungover as fuck and turn on my phone, and she had left a message. I deleted it without listening to it. The day after that, I get a call from a mutual friend, and he told me Lisa had to go to the hospital. On the night of their wedding, Lisa and Rick went downtown to party. Apparently they got into a fight and he beat her up. From what I hear, they got the marriage annulled a couple of days later. The first time I got married, when I was about 24, and I remember telling my sister that I wasn't ready to get married, but I didn't see an alternative. He was my high school sweetheart, and very traditional, and I was convinced if we didn't get married then our relationship would be over, and I wasn't ready for it to end. Then he went on tour with the military, and I started getting all the tattoos and piercings I wanted, because dad was away. And I could breathe a sigh of relief and be myself. I realized that was extremely dysfunctional, and I started tallying up all the ways I'd compromised, and what I wanted out of life to feel like myself. When he got back, he wanted to make things work, but our differences were just too big, and I didn't want to make it his turn to be miserable. That was the end of an 8-year relationship. Soon after our second wedding anniversary, the second marriage was to a same-sex partner, and it was basically for legal protection. I had been super clear from the beginning I didn't want to get married again, But then coming out got a really unsupper reaction from my family, so when they proposed I said yes because, again, I wasn't ready for the relationship to be over, and since we were going to be together for a while, yet the legal protection made sense. That marriage ended after about 9 years together. For married. Now I'm the queer polyamorous aunt who regales cousins with tales of her debauchery at family reunions, while the aunts and uncles wince and try to smile through their discomfort. I had no idea things were bad, if I'm being honest. I thought we'd worked through our problems, still both loved each other. He left 1 month after our wedding. We were together for 4 years prior to getting married. I didn't learn that he had been cheating for more than a year until about 3 months after he left. I don't think I truly realized that I wasn't happy in the relationship until about a year to year and a half after he left. It was at that point that I started talking to friends again that I hadn't spent any time with in a while because I was always too busy. Too busy meant that I didn't want to be around anyone but him. It's one of the things I can look back on now, realize that the more he made me feel like no one else would want me, the more I was clinging to him because I believed it. I truly believed he was my only chance at ever being happy or having someone love me. I also started watching the sports teams I love again, but had stopped watching games because he didn't like sports, constantly acted like it was something stupid. I didn't want to disappoint him, so I would cave and ask about things he wanted to do. There were so many red flags, but he was my first serious relationship about a year out of high school. It took me at least that first year or more after he left to even start to realize just what a prick he was, how toxic and emotionally abusive he was. It's been over a decade. Aside from an occasional memory trigger or a post like this one, I don't think of him. On the rare occasion he shows up in a dream, it's always a scenario of us being together. Me looking at him thinking how brainless he is, telling him I'm leaving. I just assume it's my brain's way of playing out how it should have ended, though I don't get why at this point. I hesitated before saying yes to the proposal. I envied how other women were treated by their partners and fantasized constantly about being with a man like that. Night of the wedding, I did not feel happy or sad, just neutral. During the wedding, I spent the day with my friends, he with his friends. I don't remember seeing him that much. We invited every relative, even people I had never met before. During photos, I was only thinking about what they would look like. I spent the night dancing with my friends until we were the only people left, and we didn't even sleep together that night. After the wedding, he did not magically turn into a husband like I thought he would. It was exactly the same. I started getting depressed 6 months in and started seeing a counselor who mentioned divorce as an option and walked me through the process. We didn't sleep together from the day we were married until we divorced 11.5 months later. I refused to have my name changed, which made a lot of family members ask constantly why. When I married my husband now, I did because I wanted children with him and finally experienced being treated how I had always fantasized. I wanted more of the same thing instead of hoping he would turn into a husband. I was so excited the night before the wedding that I couldn't sleep. The wedding was only my closest family and friends. We didn't even notice the photographer was there. We were just happy to be with each other. We left immediately after the cake so we could start our honeymoon together. We get stronger and more in love every day. We have beautiful kids and have been married over 10 years. Not me, but a friend from high school. The guy's like a real life Michael Scott. Cringe. He'll say a painfully stupid / awkward thing, and then he'll somehow top it. Seemingly no self-awareness. Took me years to really appreciate the guy. What he lacks in comedic timing and self-awareness, he makes up for with heart and determination. He seems to desperately want the approval of people, including, I assume, his parents. So like 5 years ago he starts dating this girl. Maybe 2 years into the relationship they're engaged, confirmed by Facebook pics. 6 months later the wedding is planned, and it's quite the event. Classic big expensive storybook wedding. I was unable to attend because I was not stateside, but I saw the many pics. They went all out. 6 months later, the problems begin to surface. She leaves him, and they get a divorce. The way I found out about this is particularly tragic. I was still out of the country, but I heard about her 10-year high school reunion. Apparently, after the party, he invited everybody back to his condo. There were all kinds of wedding gifts, and the place was decorated with couple stuff, initial plus initial forever. He then started crying and spilled his guts about his whole situation to a group of our high school friends. Whoa boy. I came home like 6 months later and got more details. When we met up, she had been hiding a drug habit from him. When he found out, she moved in with her dealer/boyfriend, I guess. She also took some of his money in the divorce, not to mention his money she'd been spending on drugs. To add insult to injury, she married the dude she left him for. He seemed to have really matured over the experience. He was open to talking about it. Still had his moments, of course. For example, we dated the same chick in high school. He dated her 2 years after me. I hadn't thought about her since then, and then he says, "You'll hate this, but got married." Why the fuck would I hate that, haha? Anyway, I was really impressed with the way he was handling it. I'd be drowning my sorrows. He started his own company. He works his ass off. He didn't let his embarrassing failed marriage define him. He somehow manages to stay positive. My man. I know he'll be okay, because he has the drive. I was going to create the throwaway account and all of that. But, I have nothing to hide, and the people close to me know that not 1 ounce of this is made up. I knew the day before the honeymoon. Once the wedding ring went on, she changed from Jekyll into the clown from It. At least with Hyde you knew Hyde was coming from Dr. Jekyll. Not in her case, she turned into a totally different nightmare. Dated this woman for roughly 6 years, and had about a 2-year engagement. Before marriage we would party together, have social gatherings together with both of our sets of friends, watch movies, visiting each other's families, you name it, we did it. She didn't want to be involved in the honeymoon planning, as it was the man's responsibility to plan the honeymoon and the woman's responsibility to have all the finer details of the wedding. Me being the fool that I am, "Yes honey, whatever you want baby." We both take off from work because it's close to the holiday season and we are going a destination honeymoon, which I planned as she asked. Flying out of state was an issue for her. While we are packing, she expressed some concerns for flying so far for so long, which in retrospect was kind of weird because she had flown out of the country years prior to meet with her boyfriend before me, who was abusive towards her, which needless to say was a much further flight than our destination honeymoon. Hindsight is 20/20, it appears. While on the honeymoon she expressed that she didn't want to have sex, she was tired, she had a headache, and that I wanted too much sex. But before marrying her it was her goal to keep our marital bed sacred after 4+ years of sexual encounters. I finally agreed to keep the marital bed sacred, and as soon as I agreed to shut sex down as she requested, I couldn't keep her off of me. She basically manipulated me with sex from day one. She never asked once for a kiss or even a hug, but she calls out of the blue and asks me could I come over and sit with her until the sunrise, which I did. Now we are married, she doesn't want to have sex. Fine. This is when things started spinning out of control. After marriage, I wasn't allowed to leave the house unless it was work. If she wasn't there, I wasn't allowed to go over my friend's house. I said fine, I'll invite them over to my house. When she found out that my friends were coming over, she put a stop to that and individually accused them of nefarious activities in our home, which wasn't true. Then I started hanging out with the neighbors literally across the street. She started treating them with contempt and the neighbors started asking me if my wife was a nice person or was she a jealous person. She didn't want me to visit my parents, but it was okay to visit her parents who stayed further away. We actually had to pass my parents' house to get to her parents' house. She proceeds to tell me that while she's gone away from the house on the weekends, I'm supposed to stay at home and be waiting for her when she's done doing whatever she's doing for the day. She would sneak and have private conversations in various parts of the house. Her main place of choice was the garage. Imagine thinking you're in the house with someone, only to find out this person is having a conversation in the garage with the car and act on. To this day I suspect that she was cheating, but I don't have any evidence to solidify my suspicions. When we met she was making 3-4x more than I was making. Once I finished some training that I needed, I was blessed to get a job. Unfortunately, at that time for me, that job was making more than her job. I won't find out until months down the line that this was a problem for her. She empties out our bank account by shopping until the credit cards wouldn't slide anymore. I have to ask for a 2-week extension on the rent because we literally don't have a penny to our name any longer because of her shopping habits. She empties out our bank account on 3 different incidents. We don't have any food or a dime to our name, but she has the latest shoes, purses. As a small preview into her shopping habits, she would buy so much so often. She often found herself having multiples of the same items because she'd forget that she'd already bought it. Problems start to arise once all this starts happening. I'm sleeping in a different room on a love seat for some months now. Still going to work every day, had to borrow money from a coworker to put gas in the car to make it to and from work. Bonus season is coming around for my job. Her job didn't give bonuses, and I know that the bonus money is going to hit the joint account. I also know if she sees the bonus money she's going to go on another shopping spree. So I hurry up and cash the bonus out and open another account so that I can pay the bills. She's waiting on the bonus and calls me, tells me that she sees that I spent all of her bonus money. She was depending on that bonus money so she could move herself out, she tells me. She begins screaming at me on the phone and beating her fists on something that I can hear over the phone. So I know we have a gun in the house, and right now this woman is in a frenzy because the bonus from my job was her next shopping spree and I effectively took that from her. I run home, remove the gun from the house and take it to my parents' house. I tell my parents I'm bringing this gun over so that no one will get hurt if anything goes down. My parents are concerned, but they respect what I'm trying to do. I say to myself, if she never looks for the gun, then I overreacted. If she looks for the gun, I'm sleeping on my love seat and she literally kicks the door into the room and screams, "Where is the gun?" I was scared and shocked. She proceeds to call the police on me and tells the police that I stole the gun and gave it to one of my friends that was out robbing corner stores with the gun that has her name associated with it. I explain to the cops what's going on. The cops shake my hand and thank me for being rational with the situation and suggest that I leave and protect myself. Now we are separated and she sends me divorce paperwork from the internet through the mail, and somehow, some way I receive this paperwork on my birthday. I signed the paperwork and in my heart I know it's over, and I go out and have a pretty good birthday that year. A few months later, not knowing that divorce can be such a long and grueling process, it's time to file the tax paperwork. I haven't heard from this woman in months, and she calls and states that she is at some tax office and that I better give her my SSN over the phone to some guy so that she can file and get the refund. I hire a tax attorney to find out my options, only to find out that the entire time we were married she was lying about her salary by dwindling her taxes being taken out of her check to literally a negative amount. Basically inflating her net to outdo my salary or what I was bringing home. So, when I tried to divorce the woman I couldn't legally because we owed a year's worth of taxes that I was responsible for as head of the household. These are some of the highlights of the entire incident. She has more to tell about, but I already cut this down a few times so that it wouldn't be ridiculously long. I move out of town for a handful of years and get my dream job, a job that I never once thought I would qualify for, that allows me to work remotely 90% of the time. So, I decided to move back home because my parents are getting older. When I move back, I run into some old friends who later tell me that this woman is still looking for me and wants to talk. P.S. I'm still hiding, lol.